I'm David Freeman, and this is MEDIASCAPE. CAA is a place where you have executives, agents who are super knowledgeable about what they do in their particular space. And the ultimate goal for CAA is to look at every facet of entertainment, sports, pop culture. I'll go even further and call it culture, and make sure we can have the highest level of client service for our clients, who are artists at the end of the day, right, at the highest level. And we're fortunate to really represent the 1% of the 1% of artists. And when I say artists in the biggest and broadest way, right, that's film, television, sports, speakers, and now has transcended into influencers, gamers, personalities across all aspects of entertainment and sports. And that's really something that I didn't fully understand. There are the legacy departments inside of CAA: film, TV, music, sports. But then there's 15 other departments that a lot of people don't even realize that are relatively new over the entire 45-year span of the company, that have been built because we all are experiencing these massive, massive changes in media, massive changes in entertainment, mostly from technology. So that's kind of who we and what we are. And it's gotten big. You know, when I joined, I think it was about 700, maybe 750 people. Now you're talking over 3,000, and it's a global platform around the world of experts in all these given areas. 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009, working at Edelman and working closely with advertisers and other digital companies, I just had this sense that this tidal wave of change was going to happen. You could start to see the democratization of distribution. And that fundamentally was going to change everything, right? And I started to see some of our advertisers shift some budgets from traditional television, traditional print, into digital. You started to see people starting to talk and online and grow personalities, some small audiences. And there were just these trends, right? Brands were starting to get back into, you know, things that they were doing in the 50s and 60s with content and being owners of content. And all these little things added up to us really going deep at Edelman when I had my company Matter Entertainment, around digital, right? We hired some smart folks around digital. We started to get ahead of the curve so that we could service the companies that we were working for. Being in LA, right, I got to build a network. We were helping our clients to buy talent, helping our clients to interact with all the different talent agencies, no different than the studios and the film companies, et cetera. And I got to know the folks at CAA really, really well. We started to do some business there. And you start to make friends, and we're going to talk about your network, right? And CAA was a place that was hiring experts, and they knew that their business was going to change. The technology was going to fundamentally change so many different things for their legacy businesses, for the music business. So we can go back and at all the different things that happened in music, for film, for television. I didn't exactly know. I'm not sitting here saying I knew everything that was going to happen inside of Hollywood, because I didn't. But I knew there was this tidal wave coming. And there was no digital department at CAA. It just didn't exist. And so as I continued to have these conversations and started to recognize that this was going deeper than your average business conversation, I started to sit back and really realize not only the capability that CAA had, but the clients that they represented at the highest levels, and the opportunity to start a division with what I believed would become one of the most important divisions inside of the agency was an opportunity that I just couldn't say no to. And it wasn't an easy decision. I had built Matter, but to be able to work with the client base at CAA, with where they were investing, how they were moving, was something that I couldn't say no to. We're in the service of our clients, and we wake up every day thinking about how can we grow our clients' businesses, right? It's not just follow the money. It's not just go and do deals for the sake of doing deals to drive as much revenue so we can make as much money for our clients and therefore make as much money for ourselves, right? Because it's a commission-based business. And we'll get into some other business models that I know you and I have talked about before. But fundamentally, that is what we do. However, there's a strategy behind it. Every single client, right? Whether you're the biggest gamer in the world like Ninja, or whether you're Will Smith, whether you're Vin Diesel, whether you're Katy Perry, every single client has different artistic goals, has different desires of what to expand from beyond their core business. And we're also seeing a big trend now that we can talk about a little bit later of talent understanding the difference between a paycheck and a fee-based model, which they've been used to most of their careers, and building their own companies, their own media companies, and understanding valuations and what those differences are. So for us inside of the agencies, we sit back and we think strategically for each client. What do they want? What are their goals? What are the objectives? Okay. At the same time, we're thinking about how do we build our company, right? What's coming down, the pipe? Podcasts weren't around 5 years ago, right? Immersive media had a moment 5-6 years ago. Now it's back. Now we're building, and we've been in the metaverse for a while, but obviously it's a buzzword right now, and we're building around that, right? So we always have to keep in front and center every day clients, how we're building the company, how we're bringing in the right new executive and agent talent, how we're continuing to sign. Signing's the health of any talent agency. And so there's a number of different things that we're thinking about. Obviously, there's different roles. I run a department, so I'm thinking about a lot of different things at any given day. But that's kind of a little bit of breaking down a few of the different areas. And there's connective tissue all the way through. But those are the kind of the everyday wake up, right? In addition to, let me add, not only our clients, but who we doing business with. I mean, we happen to call those folks buyers, right? So across every different division, your connectivity to who you're doing business with, whether that's a CPG company, tech company, platform company, a streamer, a VR company, a gaming company, et cetera. We have to understand how to do business with them. We have to be constantly talking about them, about what they're looking for, so that we can be bringing them our talent, right? Or the companies that we represent. So clients, buyers, every day, every day. There's two sides of it. There's 360-degree, clients, talent who can do multiple things. Will happens to be one of them, right? Television, music, film, etc., right? But what we're seeing now is the talent apply 360 to their careers and all the different areas that they can build. When we started our influencer business 7 years ago, the power of it was the audiences that these young digital creators were commanding, right? Our traditional talent at that time was a little bit skeptical about wanting to be seen as digital creators, wanting to take that fourth wall down, be authentic, be real. Usually you had only seen big motion picture or music talent doing deals overseas. You didn't see them doing as much activity here. So in the beginning, our traditional talent was very much, that's a different YouTubers, Viners, et cetera, are a different subset of artists, than we are. The reason I bring up the word creator is that social and the power of a direct-to-consumer business has changed things drastically. You look at Hello Sunshine and the exit that they just had. You look at the valuation of Westbrook, or you look at Goop, or you look at Honest, or any of these celebrity-built businesses. A lot of the value inside of those businesses is what is that celebrity's connection to their audience, and how often are they talking to that audience, right? And inside of that audience, no different than any other media company, is the data that comes along with that audience, right? And you can now build businesses, whether those are e-commerce businesses, or whether those are product businesses, or whether those are media businesses, right? There's a lot more opportunity for clients to be entrepreneurs. COVID helped that a little bit, right? Because we had a lot of clients at home who couldn't be on stage, who couldn't be on the field, who couldn't be in front of a camera. So there was an opportunity for us to talk to our clients about the power of that. And now the most interesting part is a lot of those traditional clients, because our division works with digital endemic clients as well as our traditional clients, actually are proud to call themselves digital creators, right? And a guy like Will Smith steps back and says, wait a second, I need to be on YouTube. I need to be on TikTok. I need to be on all these emerging platforms, because young millennial and Gen Z audiences, who are the fans who see my movies or listen to my music or see my TV shows, that's where they are, right? And so we're having a different conversation with our talent. And it's an exciting one because we're helping them build. We're helping them build companies and build products. It starts with your network. It starts with, who is in your universe right now and how can you start to build, right? I always tell people when they're starting to look for a new job, think about it as 12 months, right? And there's two types of interviews or get-togethers. One is an official interview because you're interviewing for a job, but almost more importantly is how can you use your network to extract information, because information begets access and different, situations. So from a 360 perspective, I think your network is a big piece of the puzzle, and how are you constantly, almost like a second job beyond whatever you're doing, thinking about how am I getting out in the world, talking about where I'm heading, what I'm doing, and making connectivity across the board. I think understanding what makes each executive, what their superpowers are, how they're differentiated, right? When we hire, that's what we're trying to figure out. It's even harder hiring now. I've hired 20 people in the last 2 years without having actually met some of these people in person. So being able to articulate who you are, what you do, what makes you unique, what are the things, what are the sensibilities we can't teach even if you come into our company at an entry level or a higher up level. Those are the things that I think are the two most important pillars. It doesn't cover all the 360, but I think we could start there and have a discussion around those two things. Odds are, if you're ready to be signed by CAA or UTA or WME, we probably know you're out there and you're probably doing something right already. You have something unique, you have a business, you have an audience, you have that it thing, because that it thing still is relevant in the entertainment business. Again, and I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, we do represent the 1% of the 1%. So we're not going to represent everybody out there, right? But it comes down to, do you have something, if we're signing you, that is unique in the marketplace, right? We're thinking about, as we built our influencer network outside of our traditional talent, we're thinking about different categories, right? General entertainment, lifestyle, comedy. Inside of lifestyle, there's fashion, there's home, there's DIY, right? Because in terms of doing business, you want a very differentiated roster of talent, right? We got into our gaming business about 5 years ago and built that, and we're spending a ton of time there. So I think it comes down to what makes you unique. The size of your audience is something we look at, no doubt about it. Not just from the size, it should really trickle down into not just how big is it, but how engaged is it, right? There's a difference between audience and fans, super fans, right? It's those hardcore super fans who most likely will, endorse that product that you might be talking about or buy that product that you're actually marketing on your own behalf, right? And so those are some key things that, that we look at. But trust me, if CAA is probably going to be thinking about signing you, we're probably tracking you. You're not really tracking us, just to be honest about that. But you know what else is interesting to that point about being found, and this is what's changed. Technology has changed this, right? There was an old way of being found, right? You have to come up this way as an actor, or this way. You have to get a record label, and or have to get a record label to notice you in music, and you could talk to that. There were for many, many years, very traditional ways of being identified as somebody who has or can be signed by a CAA, right? Things changed, right? Like we started, part of our, we do a few different things in my department, but one of them is digital endemic talent, right? And here you had technology that allowed people to be seen in a completely different way. You didn't have to wait for the callback, for the audition, or for the record label to call. You could now, out of your living room, and this happened, right? I mean, we all know it. You can now make your mark by hard work with the technology on your phone, period, end, right? And that was a massive shift. As people say, hey, I want to be an actor, I say, well, what are you doing besides just going to auditions? What work are you putting up on all these sites. How can you get out there? Are you constantly in that flow, producing, writing, putting your work out there for people to find it, because it can be found. And that was a big shift in terms of the traditional ways that people were recognized by companies like CAA. I started at CAA in 2010. So you go back 10 years, or 11 years, 12 years almost now, the landscape of digital media is completely different. I mean, you're talking about no TikTok, no Snapchat. Netflix is just starting to get ramped up. YouTubers are just starting, right? So it was a fluid, those first 3 years was very fluid. But we matured, and I'd say about 7, 8 years ago, things came into focus. 4 core areas inside of digital media. 1, content sales. Backbone of CAA since it started, we are selling content to all the new digital platforms, right? Think about a pyramid. You got Netflix at the top and a lot of other premium content platforms at the top. But then, I don't want to say that they're at the bottom, but then you've got Snapchat who's buying content, and Facebook's who's buying content, and Twitch. And there'll be 5 other different platforms that are born in the next 12 to 18 months, right? We're usually the first department in for any new platform, right? Whether they are winning or eventually lose. Quibi, for example, we were very close with Jeffrey Katzenberg as he launched that, like revving that up, providing information throughout the company to go in and sell content. We are content sellers. That's 1. 2, brand partnerships. So we have a whole team talking to brands every single day. CMOs, VP of marketing, understanding their needs, their desires to either come up with content and talent solutions for their campaigns, or on the advisory side, which we'll get to in a second, advising them on how to build and leverage entertainment, sports, pop culture. Next area is talent, right? We talked about our digital endemic creators. We've got about 175 plus digital influencers, creators, right? And we're leveraging all aspects of their businesses, whether that's endorsements or crossing them over to traditional TV and film, product when touring was around, leveraging the building and the expertise toward those audiences that they command. Inside of the talent group, we also work with a number of the Will Smiths. I've mentioned the J-Los, the Vin Diesels. I could go on and on and on. And we have some people who have, over 200 million people following them, and those are massive audiences, bigger than some of your average cable stations in terms of engagement. And then about 5 years ago, we started an advisory practice. The advisory practice was built out of, it took us a little bit to get there, and I had done that in a previous life, but we realized we had so much institutional knowledge between Silicon Valley, Madison Avenue, and Hollywood. And that intersection of the knowledge base that we had between talent partnerships, access, platforms, leagues, and across the industry, that we could provide companies with a higher level of service, right? Those are retainer-based relationships. Sometimes if they're startups, they're retainer plus equity. There's different models we can play with there, because there's a lot of great startups that we believe in. And those are the 4 areas. Inside of that, we also do VR, AR, we do gaming, that fits in our talent. And so anything probably new, podcast started with us, then there's a whole department, right? So there's a lot of new and innovation thinking inside of our group, but those are the 4 basic areas. When we onboard a client, right, we first determine what are the ambitions of that particular client. And when I say client, it could be a company and it could be talent, right? Because we do represent companies and talent. More talent than we do companies. We're pretty selective about the companies that we represent, right? But it starts with, what are the goals of the objectives and objectives, where they are at in their careers, right? If it's a digital creator that's never had an agency, that's a different situation than a very well-known big talent who might have come from a different agency, and they're probably leaving that agency because of certain things that they're not getting. But those first 2 months are a set of meetings to understand, what do they want to achieve? What are the revenue streams that they want to exploit? Getting to know them and understanding their flow of social, their desire to be entrepreneurs, their core business, and different teams are set up across each of the goals that that client has. And this, I think, and I've never been in a different talent agency, is what separates CA from other agencies based on what I heard, that it's a very team-oriented. There is a point for a given client, sometimes 2 people, and then you build expertise from the company, right? So if somebody wants to start a podcast, There's a podcast team. Somebody wants to go deep in scripted television, there's someone who's an expert there. There's an athlete who's really into gaming, there's a gaming expert on that person's team. And we build our client teams around that client. So it's really much more strategic than it is, let's just go get as much money as possible. You got to think long term. We're signing clients that we believe we're going to be with for 10, 20, 30 years. And there are clients that have been at this agency exclusively for that amount of time, right? Companies, it's a little bit different because usually there's specific reasons that they're coming to us for us to work on their behalf. But that's kind of how we think about talent. Listen, we're all going through changing how we see the world. I think Hollywood, right, has been front and center in terms of how are we making sure diversity is front and center. So I think we took a good hard look at how are we helping to promote diversity in our end product, right? Who's popping up on television? Who's popping up in film, music, etc. So are we representing the right people, right? And so we took a long, hard look at that. And how are we helping to move the industry forward in terms of making sure that there's much more diversity across everything we're doing? So that's for our artists, first of all, and taking a look in the mirror on that. Then it's also looking internally on who are we hiring, right? And how are we making sure that we're doing this the right way? And I think we've had to really take that hard look and make sure that we're giving the right opportunities for all the diverse folks that are out there, right? And so I think those two things are really important in terms of the work that we're helping our clients to get out there and representing the right folks. And then internally, how are we making sure that we're thinking about our hiring practices and how we're promoting folks and making sure that we're really being honest about our place there. But it's a huge, huge commitment from CAA at the top, from our partners in terms of what we're doing there. There has been a flood of introspection and hiring, like I said, of the right people to make sure that we're thinking about this stuff every single day. And it's the great thing about our company is when they say they're going to do something, they do it. It's not just talk. We started a conference called Amplify that was specifically around what are we doing and how can we bring our more diverse voices to everything that we're doing. I've had to go online with it, but it used to be an in-person conference to really talk about these issues and get into it. So there's a real commitment there. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to be in my business, right, we're deal makers, but you got to accept the fact that deals are going to blow up, right? It's just part of the way that it is, and it's a hard thing to swallow because usually you're driving a handful of people to the goal line. I always like to, when I talk about deals, talk about football or baseball analogies, right? And so we all get personally so involved, right? You're managing the client. You're managing the buyer, you're managing the client's manager, the client's lawyer, the buyer's lawyer. There's a lot of things that have to happen, and this is the art of deal making, and along the way a lot of things can fall apart. We're deal makers, right? And so you're not going to close every deal. That's just the nature of the business. When things linger and things go on, usually there's something wrong, right? There's something wrong. There are certain organizations that are slow, and you know that. We just got through a similar situation like that. It went on for 4 or 5 months, and we knew in our hearts there was something fundamentally wrong, and there was. You know, when you want to close a deal, usually both sides want to close, and that's the right sign. The elements are usually that upfront piece of understanding what you're trying to accomplish. Let me give you a real-world example that I'm really proud of. One of our clients is Time Studios, and they really wanted to celebrate Martin Luther King. And they had a really ambitious idea of how could we recreate in virtual reality the I Have a Dream speech, right? They actually came to us with saying, we want to do this. How do we put these pieces together, right? So you have to sit back and think about something as ambitious as that, right? How are we going to fund this? What's the technology that we have to do behind it? How are we going to attach talent into it? And what does the distribution look like, right? And I bring up this obviously because it was a successful, and it took us 2.5, almost 3 years to pull it off. But we found the right technology partners in Verizon and in a group called Riot, who were the actual VR creators of it. We found talent in Viola Davis and her company Juvee, who also had VR experience, and Viola was going to narrate it. And we got it funded through a sponsorship model with American Family Insurance. So we created and rebuilt Martin Luther King on the steps of that memorial of him in Washington, actually doing this, right? And this is what gets me up in the morning, because things like that you can actually pull off, that might not happen right away, is what's exciting. Unfortunately, we were going to tour that experience to a number of different African American museums and universities, and then COVID hit. But we actually did pull it off, and it was on the cover of Time magazine. So usually any project has a number of different facets of what we call packaging, putting things together to make sure we're getting either a brand to buy it, a platform to buy it, and that's a big part of the art of what we do at the company. If you're going to present via a deck, right, if you haven't said it in the first 3 to 5 pages, then it's probably not the right idea. People should know right away, what are you selling, what's unique about it, and how is this interesting, right? We get a massive influx of people wanting to pitch us, pitch our clients, pitch the companies that we're representing. And so how do you differentiate there? You got to be, I believe in short, concise. Your pitch shouldn't be any more, in my opinion, than 10 to 12 minutes. If you've got a half-hour meeting, which is how we kind of usually set them up, maybe it's 45 minutes, you should be in and out of what you're pitching in that first 10 to 12 minutes. And if you get into a good dialogue, then you've got something. Then you know you're moving the ball up the field, to go back to that, football analogy. So I'm a big believer in tightness, in when you're pitching, having 2 or 3 people at most sharing the insights and what it's going to look like. But you kind of know, we kind of know within the first probably 4 to 8 minutes whether we're interested in that for a particular client. That's the bottom line. There's no one way to do it. I'm a big believer in visuals, and video. Getting people excited with visuals is certainly much easier. We're all visually driven. We all work in a visually driven, medium and space. It really depends what you're pitching, right? Everything requires kind of a different way of thinking about it, and how are you being strategic? But video, music, set a tone, set a pace, or a deck that is visually there. I'm also a big believer in less words on the page and more of that team kind of pitching a story, right? We represent storytellers, and usually what we're giving back to an audience is a storytelling experience. So I think storytelling inside of a pitch is also really important. Listen, it's the one thing I tell all of the young folks who I talk to, whether it's those assistants that we're hiring, or whether it's a lot of the folks who come to me say, hey, can you talk to my friend's friend and is a senior in college, or anyone who's really looking at their career. Networking is, in my business, which is all of our business to a certain degree, is the number one most important thing you can do. You don't always realize it when you're young, but everybody you're meeting between 20 and 30, at some point in the not so distant future, everyone rises up together, right? And I realized that by the time I got to be 35, 36, 37, and I realized, wow, like all the people that I've stayed in touch with are now in decision-making positions across the industry, right? Staying in touch with people, reaching out on LinkedIn, finding mentors that you can really kind of like bounce things off of who you should be spending time with. It's a job unto itself. I have lists of people, whether I'm doing business with them or not, that I stay in touch with. How are you? What's going on? What's new at your job? If you're a brand, what are you thinking about? What are your challenges, etc.? And even if there's not an immediate thing to transact on or do a deal with, I'm staying in touch with these people, because I know at some point either they're going to be at a different job that I want to be able to connect with them about, or my clients are going to call up and say, hey, what's my metaverse strategy? Tell me what I should be doing with Facebook or Fortnite or Roblox or any of these new worlds. I'm just using metaverse because it's a trend right now. But you got to make it an active thing, an active exercise throughout your entire career, period, end. I think it's the same characteristic that I see in really successful business people. Do the work. Do the work, you know, and I remind myself of that too, right? When I have those moments maybe of insecurity or doubt, like do the work, stay focused on the work. Yes, talent is part of whether you're an actual talent or whether you're an executive is part of it. No doubt about that, right? But what separates all these people and how do you rise up to it, whether it's the 1% of executive or the 1% of talent, it's do the work. I think it's be authentic, be true to who you are. Don't try to BS your way through it, you know. But those two things, I always remind myself, do the work. Get up and do the work. I'm shocked when people interview with me that they don't do their research. I'm shocked. You know, I always ask the question, tell me a little bit about what you know about our group or our department, right? If you were to look up me on LinkedIn or anywhere else, you could connect to the people that are in our group, right? We're all under digital media at CAA. And when somebody can't just say, oh, I recently read about that deal you just announced or the partnership you know that you just announced or that CAA is in negotiations to acquire ICM or something. There's news out there across the board. I am shocked the lack of research that people do either when they're interviewing or when they're pitching, right? To start a conversation, because you want to know that someone has taken the time to understand what you're doing, what you do, who you represent. It's mind-boggling to me sometimes that people just walk into that situation cold. 5 years ago, I hired my first gaming executive, right? Just knowing that we needed to get into that space. The reason I got into digital was you felt, like I said, that tidal wave coming, right? And when I say gaming and metaverse, it's not just the obvious things that are happening there, but the mentality of a new set of consumers who digest and consume their media completely differently than the way a lot of us have. Certainly the way I have, and probably you have, Joseph, even though I know we have a lot of young folks. And that shift, I get excited about the big shifts, right? And XR, AR, VR, NFTs, blockchain, like this is going to fundamentally change a lot of different businesses, but the impact it's going to have on entertainment, sports, culture, pop culture is going to be so significant. And we're not even in first inning, or not even, you know, at all. We're in preseason of it all, right? But figuring it out, being on the front lines, being able to have some of the greatest storytellers that we can apply to all these new worlds that are going to build is exciting, you know. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but for me, right now I have that itch and that desire to learn, because anyone who says they're an expert here, no, it's just not there yet, right? It's just being born. No different than 2000, no different than 2000 to 2012 when influencers were born and social media really became into existence. There are these moments, and I think we're about to go through another one of them, and that's what's got me really jazzed right now. I wish I'm going to say something that people haven't heard before, but I believe in it, and I think it's the only way. The only way you know it is after having a lot of experiences, and it's this: the journey is the most fun part, far and away, right? You always think, I got to get to the next level in my career. Okay, I'm here. How do I get here? How do I get here? How do I get from making this amount of money to that amount of money, et cetera, right? Before you know it, you're always just chasing your own tail, right? And so being present, right? Really present. And I'm not saying it that I'm some guru or Buddha who has mastered that, but I know the more present I am in my day, talking to a client, talking to a colleague, talking to you, the more I'm here and the more I can give in that moment versus worrying about tomorrow, worrying about yesterday. There's nothing you can do, right? And so it's a little bit of appreciating the journey, right? You're only young once, right? And I usually tell, you know, folks that are young, like, go see the world for the first 5 years. Don't worry about your career. Easier said than done, because I did the opposite and you probably did the same. But how do you appreciate the journey? How are you being present? And how are you mentoring other people? I'm a big pay it forward guy. I love mentoring. That's why I'm doing this, right? When you called, I mean, you saw, I think you were a little surprised how excited I was, because it is about the next generation. It is about giving back, right? And we're all so busy, but how do you make sure you're doing that? So it's kind of a combination of all three of those things. But we always think that we're gonna get to the end and look back, but it's actually the journey. And I've realized that. I wish I kind of knew it when I was a little bit younger, to appreciate all those different stepping stones along the way.